All right, it's morning huddle time. Good morning.
No,
I'm not saying it works.
I wish you
I'm just saying it
Godspeed.
happens.
Godspeed with all of that. I think that's really, really nice. I'm not sure what kind of success you're going to have with that today because the world, my friend, has changed.
Right.
Latin American construction workers, they have different needs. They have completely different needs.
These awards have a huge criteria that you have to fill out, and they usually have a community service or community relations portion.
Makes them, the most productive with a high performance value, and sometimes it's 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Funny, isn't it? Yeah, not for me.
Not for me.
At 11 o'clock, I am guaranteed to be snoring. So. Good morning. It is morning huddle time. We have Trey Farmer with us, and of course, Stacy, my co-host. Stacy, how are you today?
I'm a little depressed about the Eagles, lost, but I will recover.
I am depressed for you. I know how it feels to have your team lose in the championship game. Better than 30 other teams in the NFL, but not better than the one. That was tough, man. That was tough. How about the holding call? Was it a call? Was it a hold, or was it not a hold?
I don't know.
The player said it was a hold. He called himself out. He goes, "It was a hold." He said it was a hold. It was. I didn't think it was a hold when it happened, but I respected the player afterwards in the locker room, saying like, "No. I held him. I grabbed his jersey." That's what happened. So it was cool. But it's a tough one. I'm on this group text with a group of friends, all from Philadelphia, and yesterday it was like total crickets until about noon, and one guy just texted, and I'm talking like 15 people, and one guy just texted, "I'm so depressed," and then another guy just texted like, "No motivation at all today," kind of thing. And it's tough. It's hard to. Hey, next year. There's always next year, right? It's hard to rally it up.
Yeah.
Trey, are you a football fan? Do you have a team?
I am a Patriots fan, so we've
just many years of relentless celebration followed by the inevitable being okay as opposed
to well, it's like being from New England, right? It's like we were kind of on the other side of it with the Yankees for so long. That then it was good, but you could also empathize with the haters. So
totally, totally. You're like, I know what it feels like to feel like that there's a team that just has an unfair advantage. Yeah. Well, cool. So Trey joins us from Forgecraft Architecture in Texas, in Austin, Texas. I've had the good fortune of having some exposure to their work in my work in Texas. And I haven't worked with Trey directly, but I was talking to one of his colleagues about interesting topics. And he said, what would be an interesting topic is passive house design. And I said, well, I don't know what that is. So you're going to have to tell me whether that's interesting or not. And it turns out that Trey not only is passive house certified, and we'll get into what all that means, but also actually lives in a certified passive house himself, and can actually speak to it not just as a design professional, but can speak to it as a homeowner. And so Stacy asked this question right out of the gate, right? Like, is this only for houses? So we're going to get into that and many more questions. Stacy, I'm confident that the audience through the course of our conversation will have some interesting questions that pop up. As you always do, I'll leave you to stoke the interesting discussion, and we'll bring you back here to get some, audience questions before we wrap up.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks, Stacey. All right, so let's start from scratch. Assume our audience knows as much as I knew, which is absolutely nothing. Whenever we first talked, what is passive house design? Just a simple description.
Yeah, it is. So it's a third-party certification, and it's an above code building code, basically, that's looking primarily at energy use. So it's basically the most aggressive above code building certification. So it's Passive House Institute US is partnered with the US Department of Energy. So there's sort of like Energy Star, Zero Energy Ready Home, Net Zero, and then Passive House is kind of the highest tier of energy efficiency. And so it, depending on your climate, it'll drop your energy bills by 40 to 80%. So the analogy we use a lot is a Yeti cooler. If you think about like those old school coolers versus a Yeti cooler, it's like more insulation. The main thing though is that it's airtight. Like that airtightness really holds the energy really well. So you get a better building. It's more resilient when the power goes out. It'll hold your heat in the winter, hold your cool in the summer. And then also you're controlling where all of your fresh air is coming from in your house. So there's no leaks, nooks and crannies, no air sneaking in through the holes in the wall where the cockroaches live. It's all getting filtered through a port and mechanically brought in. So there's all these knock-on benefits for health and no dust, no pests, all that sort of stuff. Really quiet. We live pretty close to a highway, and before we renovated, we could hear cars going over the expansion joints. We could hear trains whenever they went by, and now nothing, which is really, really great.
It is great. That's I live relatively close to a main road as well, and I was right after our conversation last week. I started like Googling how do I go through a passive house renovation, because just for the sound benefits, I was like, hey, nice to save money too. But okay, I've got. I'll start. I'm gonna set you up with two questions relatively quickly. Because I can't decide which one I want to know first. One is, what is what are the differences between net zero and passive house, and like what are some things that make passive house design the most aggressive? What are the things that make it sort of unique? And then the second question right on the back of that is, talk about just your application, where you are in the world, and what the renovation actually consisted of, and then I'll take exhaustive notes and try to figure out a budget.
Perfect. Yeah, so you can have a net zero passive house. They're kind of net zero is like you use about the same amount of energy over the course of a year as you produce. Usually with PV on a single family home anyway. And so passive house is probably the best way to get there. So the idea is you're pulling some of that money out of your PV or out of your utility bill and putting it into your mechanical system and your envelope. So like more insulation, better windows, more durable weather barrier. Air tightness is probably the biggest lift, I guess, at least in our climate. And so the whole thing is cost optimized, right? So it's like we don't want to throw so much insulation at your walls that you're getting these diminishing returns and just burning money, right? And also, from an environmental standpoint, there's embodied energy in insulation, and so we don't want to be trying to reduce our operational carbon, right? The amount of fossil fuels getting burned to heat and cool your house by putting too much into your walls. It's all about kind of finding the sweet spot and trying to make a more sustainable house that's also healthier and does better in outages. So like for our house, right, we're in Austin, so it's relatively mild climate, compared to the coasts and New England. So what that looked like for us, our walls are about double code. Our code minimum wall is an R13 wall, so that's a 2x4 with fiberglass bats here. So we have 2x6 walls, and then we use the Zip R6, which is so zip sheathing is pretty ubiquitous down here. It's like the sheathing with an integrated weather barrier, the green sheathing you see around a lot.
Yep.
And so they make a version of that has polyiso on the back side of it, and you can get that in various thicknesses. So you get your continuous insulation, but you only have to make one trip around the building. So we did that because it was like a little easier and more normal, down here.
So this is I'm going to pause here just for a second as I wrap my head around it. So this is an existing structure. It sounds like you're pulling off the skin of the building so that basically it gets stripped down on both sides, because you also have to go from 2x4 to 2x6. When you go to 2x6, do you just fur out a 2x4 wall, or do you literally replace all your studs?
So Our house was 105 years old when we renovated it, and we were intending to keep the 2x4 studs and do a thicker zip system, thicker continuous insulation.
Okay, got it. So you would have just done it on the outside.
Yeah, and we looked at doing it on the inside, and it was just very expensive.
I can imagine.
And then, but our wall, it was like there were no jack studs, we had no headers, it was all balloon frame down below the floor. The floor was 1.5 inches out of level, so we ended up redoing most of the framing. Like there's very little. It's a renovation, but there's very little of the existing wood that was in the house. We thought we were going to be able to keep a lot more of it than we could. It's kind of like peeling away the onion, and it's every layer you get to is rotten. So we were lucky enough to be able to switch to 2x6 walls, which is like gives us a little bit stouter frame.
Sure.
We didn't mind losing the 2 inches of the interior footprint. And then we were able to back off of that continuous insulation a little bit, which also kind of saved us some money in our window detailing as well.
Okay, got it. So we've got the insulation. Now go to the windows. What did you do window wise?
So we used Marvin windows, and they're triple pane, and we used a mix of. So we were like the first shipment of Marvin Modern, which is this line that they put out a couple years ago that are very like sleek looking, high performing windows. And then we used some of their Fibrex windows, which is I think the ultimate. And then we used their like wood clad windows because it's a historic preservation. So we tried to match the kind of historic facade with new triple pane casement windows, but they have a sort of a check rail in them. So they look like double hung windows from the outside. We're in a protected historic neighborhood.
Got it.
So we wanted to we redid the detailing, redid the brackets and the roof detailing, and used siding that matched the profile and window casing and trim that matched what was there before. But now they're new triple pane windows that look kind of like double hung unless you come up really close to them and inspect them.
Awesome. All right, cool. Anything else that you did to finish yours?
I'd say so. Then so air tightness is a bit going for here. Code air tightness is 5 air changes per hour, right? So that's sort of the leakiness of your building. And we had to be at 0.5, so 10x code, which is quite tight. And so when you get to that level of air tightness, then your mechanical system, we have a ventilator, so we're constantly bringing fresh air in with an ERV, which is basically a box that allows you to constantly bring fresh air in without paying the energy penalty. So it's like pushing stale air out, and the heat and moisture energy kind of come to equilibrium in that box. So you're not you're not paying the same energy penalty if you're just like open a window for all day long.
All in, can I ask roughly budget wise what this square footage of your home and roughly what it costs?
So our house is 2,100 square feet, and then I'm in a loft right now. So one of the things that's kind of cool is we moved all the insulation from the ceiling up to the roof, and we got a nice little bonus space. It's my office now, but we also were able to carve into that, like in the kitchen. We can post some photos later. Have this big, like, sort of splayed light well, and then our bathrooms have some skylights. So you kind of steal back some of that space, which was just kind of dumb hot space with our AC in it. It's kind of crazy that we run our air conditioner through the hot. It's a space that's even hotter than outside. So yeah, as far as price, I think a typical, like this was a custom home, right? So it's not the cheapest home you could possibly build. It wasn't, ultra luxury either, but we'd say probably like 5%, somewhere in that like 5 to 8% range. Also, like we were learning a lot. We hustled a lot of materials from friends. So, I think 5% is a good target. And what we're seeing in multifamily is you can actually get down to cost parity with this.
Really?
With passive house. Because, as you think about like a multifamily building, a unit only, might only have insulation on 2 sides, right? On the exterior walls, but then it's got all these shared walls. And then there's just economy of scale, you're repeating everything so many times. So yeah. And then as the markets mature, we see a lot more passive house in Seattle, Portland, Vancouver, and then sort of like New York, Chicago, Philly are definitely like ahead of the adoption curve. We're still kind of new at it down here. So we're still learning, our trades are still learning, we're still getting our supply chains up and running. But what we've seen in those other markets is that the costs come down pretty quickly when people start doing it all over the place.
So now we're getting to that question, which is, it's obviously not only for single family homes. Talk about some applications where this is, currently working in the United States and elsewhere.
Yeah, so we were talking before we jumped on. The first Passive House certified hospital just finished its certification in Frankfurt, Germany. So I think that's about a 30 million euro project. Pretty cool though, like it's a big benefit of this is the healthy air and the comfort. And so having a hospital is like probably the first place you'd think of. There's New York. There's some 40, 50 story condo and apartment buildings going up that are Passive House certified. There's schools, museums. It's really it runs the gamut. Single family homes. It kind of started with single family homes and then affordable housing, mature, and really like Europe, Pacific Northwest, and the Northeast are where things have taken off over the last 10, 15 years.
But that's awesome to hear that there are so many applications, and I particularly like as I think about comfort, and you think about health. There's to me a really natural and relatively hot market in the U.S. right now is senior living. Are senior living projects looking at this?
I would think so. We do a lot of like affordable and workforce housing. We did one senior living project maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, but it's not something that our firm is focused on. I would be pretty surprised if there wasn't senior living looking at it. I know of a couple projects like in Maine and Massachusetts that are doing it. But yeah, totally makes a lot of sense. Senior living, anything that's especially with like legacy owners, where if you've got like a senior living facility that's going to be owning it for 10 years, then you're going to pay back the first cost. And then after that, it's all just gravy. You're getting all of the health benefits and durability benefits and significantly reduced utility bills.
Yeah, it does seem a no-brainer, particularly if you're getting close to cost parity. In the construction phase, that's usually the thing that causes everybody, all the deals to break down this way is like, well, be nice to do.
Yeah, exactly. And we work with a lot of like supportive housing providers, and so they're going to own the project for 50 or 100 years. So it's like, why not get out in front of it? And and it's starting to become code. A lot of areas are setting it up as a REACH code. Massachusetts just set it up as a REACH code for multifamily, where cities and municipalities can opt into it. And so I think there's 5 or 6 municipalities in Massachusetts that are going to start requiring it for anything over 6 units, which is pretty exciting. So then that'll help that cost curve come down too.
Yeah. It does. I mean, there's always the initial pushback and frustration, and I'm sure plenty of contractors and plenty of developers are will be throwing their hands up. But if it really fundamentally does bring the cost curve, if the cost is close, unless you're literally building to sell, you're gonna benefit from it if you're the owner.
Right. And then there's, code is there also to help the end user and protect people and things like that. So the ROI question is like, it makes sense, right? As like as a first thing to think about, but it really is, it's just the first cost of the building. And what about the overall cost of the building over the 50 or 100 years is going to be in use? And then that's not even considering like the health costs of, childhood asthma and things like that,
Yeah, if we're going to put dollars on something like that.
Right, exactly.
Right, which does have a financial aspect, but it's also bigger than that. What would you pay to keep your kids healthy?
Yeah, exactly. What's the return on investment on granite countertops versus your kids?
I have a formula I'll run past you on.
Perfect. We'll figure it out. We got it.
how do contractors react to this type of building standard, and how does this actually impact the majority of our audience are contractors, general contractors, specialty contractors. How do they react to this type of standard, and how can they help or hurt?
Yeah, I think it runs the gamut, like some contractors are really excited about this and will jump at the chance to get involved, like early adopters or people really trying to like push the boundaries of what they're doing. And then some, we get a lot of groaning as well. So, it kind of similar to how our firm had worked with you on these projects in Houston was like, we want to create a team that's collaborating around the project. So like everybody's involved. If it becomes an antagonistic thing where it's like, we're forcing this down the contractor's throat, then that's not going to work, right? It's not going to be a successful thing. We all need to be on the same page about it. We all need to want to be doing it for the same reasons. And so sometimes that means educating contractor. Sometimes that means incentivizing the contractor. Sometimes that means working with a different contractor. Really, we want to work with contractors who want to work on the project and are excited about this kind of like, pushing things forward or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's a mindset. It's a mindset, right. and I, as I think about it's this case for all. I don't care what standard we're building to or what code we're building to. It's always the case that your specialty contractors need to become good partners for each other out in the field, thinking about the guy that comes before them and the guy that comes after them, and taking care of each other through the course of it. But when you're building to this type of standard, especially when it's new, what are the things that contractors would do that, maybe it's cutting corners, but like, how does a contractor accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, undermine hitting this type of standard?
Yeah, I mean, airtightness is really the tricky one, especially in our market where like our existing codes are pretty loose, and so it's not really, there's not a lot of buffers. Like there aren't requirements around airtightness testing necessarily that are getting followed, and then just the code minimum is pretty loose. Adding more insulation, that's in your spec, that's very easy to price, right? It's easy to detail. That's kind of no biggie. The mechanical system, same thing, right? Like it might cost a little bit more, but the mechanical engineer is kind of dealing with the design, and the installer is able to handle the install and execute. Airtightness is tricky because it's like there's so many trades, right? You've got your electrician, your plumber, your HVAC guy, random subs who are coming out, and so it's like you've got to and that's where it really is on the contractor, and where it's tricky, and where I have a lot of empathy for the GC, because this is a thing where they're already having to kind of babysit a lot, right? And like keep an eye on everybody and make sure everything's happening the way it should be and the way it's drawn and working well. And now they also have to make sure that nobody's poking any holes in the building without air sealing it, or that they're, it's like when you're running electrical conduit, it's one hole, one thing, right? With air sealing. Because if you bundle all your conduit, put it through one big hole, it's really hard to air seal that. But if you just poke one wire through, you can seal it really well. So it's just like some different ways of thinking about stuff, some different ways of training. It's really about communication at the fundamental level. Like the doing is not too tricky. It's the communicating and making sure everybody's on the same page and everybody understands why we're doing this.
Yeah. As the designer on the project, are you actually out there doing any training, helping, or are you training the GC how to train, or how does that work?
Yeah, we do, especially on like the single family stuff, we're a little more involved, on the ground, like with our house. I mean, part like is our house too, but we really wanted it to be a kind of like open source case study, right? Like we had the opportunity to do this thing that was a little new. We were working with a builder who was a friend and who was really into it. And so we hosted, I don't know, probably like 15 sort of open houses where we had Huber come and do a zip install, showing how to air seal and detail around windows. We had Marvin do a install. We did a bunch of blower door tests. We rented a fog machine from Rock and Roll Rentals and filled the house up with smoke, and then positively pressurized it so you could see where all the air leakage was, because there was smoke pouring out.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It was really fun, and just like bought a lot of beer and barbecue and invited everybody we knew over to see it.
Yeah.
So trying to like show that it's not too weird or too crazy. But yeah, again, like a lot of collaboration with our builder and with our trades, which was it's really fun, as long as everybody is like into it and on the same page. It's super rewarding, for me, because I learned a ton from the trades and our GC about like how the things are actually getting installed, the sequencing, and that helps me be a better designer. And then that all kind of comes full circle.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think so. Brought in Stacy. I know we have some questions that we want to get to, but I just want to say before we do that I think you've done a really great job of taking this thing that, like a lot of these things, Trey, it's like it's new. It feels a little green or annoying to some people, right? Like like if you're not like thinking sustainably, it can sound just sort of like, oh God, like we're doing more.
Yeah.
But I think you've done a really nice job of making it easy to understand, and like you said, like making it not weird or scary. Like this is not that strange. There are just a handful of things that we're doing here to focus on. I love the Yeti cooler analogy, air tightness, and recognizing that if we can focus on that, we can dramatically reduce our energy consumption, which has just who doesn't win aside from utility companies when we do that. That's a
they win too, though, because it's then the house kind of acts as a battery, and so their peak, it's really expensive for them to have this like really variable load, and so we can kind of squish those peaks with more of these buildings because you can pre-cool them or preheat them, and then at those times when they'd have to run the peaker plants that are super expensive. So we see a lot of utilities buying in, or some utilities are a little more forward thinking than others, but yeah, we love it. And so our firm is now only doing passive houses for custom homes, and we're using it as kind of a sandbox. Like those have a little bit more customization and wiggle room, but we can learn a lot from them, and then we can track those lessons learned up to our multifamily and commercial projects and see, okay, we know we can do this easily, we know it's not going to cost a lot, let's track that up and start getting contractor buy-in on the bigger stuff.
I can't wait to start seeing it on some of the bigger stuff that I'm involved in, and if anybody's watching, thinking about a strong multifamily quality architect, that's the space that I've worked with these guys. I've never personally experienced a more participatory and stronger partnering mindset from an architect, just really going out of their way to make it easy for construction to occur, and communicating openly and often. So they're a great pick if anybody's looking for one. So Stacy, what do we have for questions? I want to try to get at least a couple in here before we wrap up.
Sure. Dennis has a great question. How does the design work with the new COVID air requirements? Most builds are going to more air movement and air changes.
Yeah, and Chad, thank you so much. I was getting goosebumps there. We really strive for that and try to, and we've loved working with you and your team, and that the whole idea of like a high trust relationship and everybody being in it for the project has really changed how we think about it. So
thanks, man. That's great to hear.
Appreciate your work. Yeah, so it's essentially like it's perfect with COVID requirements because we know how much we're ventilating. Most homes don't actually bring in fresh air. They're just, the analogy I've heard is kind of when you flush a toilet and the water just swirls around, right? So we're actually bringing in fresh air 24/7, meeting all our ASHRAE 62.2 requirements, filtering all that air with we have a MERV 16 filter box and then MERV 13 filters on our dehumidifier and our ERV. So you're catching all those virus particulate and controlling your fresh air. So your CO2 stays down, you're breathing well, you're sleeping well. So it really pairs well with all the COVID air requirements.
Awesome.
Thank you. So what is Source Zero? How can you explain that?
So Source Zero is kind of an add-on to the Passive House certification so we're doing an energy model, like a 3D, pretty robust energy model that FIAS, the Passive House Institute US, is vetting through many rounds of review. And within that energy model, if you have more production than use, then and then you execute that in the actual project, then you get this Source Zero tag. So it's basically saying that the project, and so that's it produces as much as your house, and then there's essentially, depending on your utility, there's a metric for like how much transmission loss you're getting. So that's why it's Source Zero instead of Site Zero. If that makes sense.
Got it. I think, I'm glad that there are people like you, and obviously I'm sure lots of colleagues out there who are, really working to take these, high-minded concepts about reducing our carbon footprint and creating more sustainability and, reducing overall energy consumption, and really turning them into practical application and asking yourself, how do we get it to actually happen? And and I love hearing that as a firm, you're only doing this type of design, and that's awesome. I mean, that's with single family. I heard that part of it too. But with single family, this is the only type of custom single family design that you're doing, and I think that's how you know that there is momentum behind a thing, and that the thing isn't so pie in the sky, cost prohibitive, painful, that it will never get legs. So I'm sure there are hurdles. I'm sure there are going to be still projects for which this doesn't make sense, and where people push pause and say, yeah, we're not going to be shooting for Passive House certification here. It just doesn't make sense for. But if overall it moves the needle in the right direction, I think that's that's a win for, again, it's a win for everybody. It's
and for us, it was like, we did a handful of them, and having lived in one, and then Scott Ginder, one of the founders of our firm, lives in a very close to Passive House home that he built for his family. And it's just like, okay, there's no other way to do this. It's just got to be our best practice. And so if we just plant a flag, then we're hoping that people will come to us who want to do this. And really, it's like the energy, we kind of came at it from the energy efficiency and the sustainability side, but after having lived in them and feeling like the health benefits and the comfort benefits, like that's really where it's at. I think we do it for these reasons, regardless of the other stuff.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I said. It's like, to everybody's benefit, probably most of all to the occupants of the space, which is that's how it's a really, it's not just to meet some code requirement goal. It's just fundamentally better. So it's great stuff. Last question: Do you where will you take on projects? Are you only designing in Texas?
No, we do work all over the country. We're primarily in Texas, Austin, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, but we have done projects in California and Pennsylvania, Colorado, New England. So we'll go anywhere. We love it. I mean, it's a new challenge everywhere, working in new climate, new space, and that's the fun thing for us. And then I saw the tax credit question in the chat. So with the Inflation Reduction Act, you get tax credits now for Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready Home. So it's the Zero Energy Ready Home is a higher tier. So if you certify with Passive House Institute US, that's safe harbor for both of those. So you automatically get Zero Energy Ready Home, EPA Indoor Air Quality Plus, and WaterSense certifications when you certify with FIAS.
Nice.
So you can get those tax credits, which can really add up, especially in a multifamily or a common lot, right? Like $5,000 a unit can add up.
That adds up fast, no doubt. That's great to know. Very cool. All right, good. Stacy, anything else on your mind?
I was just curious. Do you have any videos you could share? I'd love to include like a visual for our follow-up email to our viewers.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure we can dig something up.
All right. Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. Send it. maybe post it in the chat here even, and send it to Stacy that way, regardless whether you're. So you know what though, darn it, people need to be on our mailing list. So please email us to be added to our weekly mailing list. Email Stacy H at steeltoecom.com and we'll get that stuff over to you.
Great.
The Trey shares.
Awesome. Yeah, we did a few videos with the build show during construction that I can share. It was pretty fun.
Awesome.
Nice. All right, cool. Any parting comments, Trey, before we wrap it up?
No, just thank you guys for doing this and for having these conversations. I've really enjoyed getting into your podcast over the last couple months. And also, big shout out to Chad. If anyone's doing a multifamily project, bring him in on the team. It's been a huge asset to us.
They are not my customer, and I'm not paying Trey. I don't know what else. I was brought in by the developer, and I've been pretty hard on their guys, but they're I mean, really, I'm hard on everybody on the project. But the project is this team is that we're working on together is really, really clicking, and it's anyway. Lots of thank you. I appreciate clearly I don't know how to take a compliment. Trey, we'll have to catch up again soon. I'll be in touch next time I run down to Austin way.
Great, appreciate it. It'll be fun. Take care.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, Stacy, let's do a little housekeeping and talk about next week. So next week, same time, same channel for episode number 41 with Tim Klimchak. Tim is I don't know, maybe 25-year or 30-year accountant. He was a partner at an accounting firm for many of those years. Fantastic book of business, all serving the AEC community. And he recently left and started really his own little consulting gig, helping to work, just on the consulting end of getting contracting companies, financial houses in order, which has been, I work with Tim on some of my client engagements. He's doing an awesome job, and I really wanted to pull him into this discussion. He's going to talk about the type of relationship that contractors should strive to have with their accounting firms. And I think there's an opportunity in there for business owners, for CFOs and controllers, as well as our obviously anybody else in our regular audience to learn. But this might be one where you drag somebody in the CFO suite or the controller suite into this show and have them listen in, because Tim built an amazing book of business, really based on the principles he's going to share with us, which is going to be cool. So there's that for next week. Obviously, we're always asking you to join our mailing list and be sure to catch us on all of our platforms. Obviously live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, but then be sure to check out our recorded shows on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube every week. We get those uploaded right away. So if you miss the show, you will catch it later on, same day. Stacy, anything else that I'm forgetting from a housekeeping standpoint?
I don't know if we can announce it yet, but we will be attending a conference soon live. So maybe next week we can see if we can get permission for that announcement.
I think, yeah, okay. We'll wait till next week. But yeah, we are going to do our first road show. We're gonna be live at a conference this May in the DC area, and we look forward to that experience and getting it under our belt, and then maybe kind of making a thing of it, doing it on a regular basis, and checking out where some of the coolest conversations are happening in the industry, and going and joining those conferences for a live show. So I look forward to that. That's a great point, Stacy, and we'll have more to share as those details become formal. So awesome. Anything else?
That's it. Have a great day.
Have a great day. We'll talk to everybody soon. Please tune in next week.
See ya.